Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
Hey.
Well, hello.
Welcome, everybody.
Sorry to be late this morning.
Yeah, we were doing a sound check and it was like, there is something really
static.
staticky. So we just wanted to make sure that everything sounded really good and kind of rearranged ourselves a tidge so that we can talk to each other.
Yeah,
and
kind of
talk to you.
a little different setup we're experimenting with here.
Yeah.
So I like it so far.
Loving the new studio.
Yeah.
We got all these, what do you call them? Acoustic tiles.
Mm-hmm.
And got the stuff yesterday to be able to start setting all of those up, and kind of excited about
Yeah.
that. Give us a shout out about where you're listening from. Welcome anyone that's new to the show, and really glad that you all could join us today. It is April 12th.
Is it?
It's almost the middle of April.
Yeah.
We all have 3 days. 3 days?
Oh yeah.
It's last I checked.
Before Friday or before?
Before it's April 15th, which is typically
taxes, of course.
Yeah. So it was funny. I was when I was on that girls trip this last weekend, all of them said, "Oh crap, I need to."
Mm-hmm.
All of them.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's so gorgeous out here.
Weather took a turn. We're finally warming up. The snow in the yard is pretty much all gone except in the shade, and so it definitely is starting to feel like spring.
I have my mom coming over later on today, and we're going to plant flowers.
Excellent.
Yeah, a little bit of quality. It's the 18th this year. Thank you, Hugo, because that shows how much I pay attention to the dates. I just know that it's like, historically, this is the thing.
Yeah.
73 degrees in Scottsdale. Yesterday, it was almost 80 degrees here.
Yeah.
And the snow is melting quickly.
Yeah.
So it's we went on a walk and all of the drainage systems that they have through this area are very nicely full.
Yeah.
Which is good because it's been such an incredibly big drought. So we have announcements. We can get past the weather and all of our personal stuff.
I got a couple listed here. BHPH United starts on the 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just over about 2.5 weeks away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So just if you're planning to do BHPH you got to get those tickets bought and get out there to Vegas. And then the 3rd of May, right on the heels of that, is
the next day,
the NEO User Summit.
And we will be at that.
Yeah. Looking forward to that.
We've got a lot of clients on NEO, and it's going to be good training.
Yeah.
So looking forward to
that.
And
also just following up on the Dealer Action Forum, I got to tell you, we haven't gotten much feedback on that. Maybe that's not as important to dealers. Yeah, maybe it's not as important. And I think it's true that a lot of dealers don't really fully know how much they need that. Like they just don't realize how important it is.
I think it's that. And I think it's, I need to do that.
Maybe.
Oh yeah, I need to do so. If you haven't had a chance to weigh in on that,
but if we don't get feedback and we don't get support from dealers on this, we can't really mobilize on your behalf. So we got to do your part, which is kind of ties into what we're going to talk about today, which is collections. Which I also got to say is we've made the decision to make collections the theme for the entire month of May. Mm-hmm. So we will be bringing, and we invite submissions. If you have certain subjects inside collections that you'd like to see us bring, we're going to be pretty much scheduling out the whole month of May on collections topics. So please. And we'll be inviting specialists to the conversation in various parts of that. So look forward to that. But we came today to talk about accountability and that whole thing about that line between friendly and firm, and how do we, can we be both friendly and firm without getting too friendly? And how do we hold folks accountable?
We discussed this quite a bit this morning, and we were talking about, and I don't think we'll get into it today, but like the difference between being friendly and being a friend.
Yeah.
And there's, you can be really friendly and still hold that line. The minute you cross that line into friend, it's like, oh, you can make an exception.
Yeah. And I've got a story I can tell around that if we have time. I don't know that we need to tie it into what we're doing today, but it certainly is that line that we all have to walk about being friendly, but we also have in our collections departments and in our relationships with our customers and collections, we're all familiar with that idea that if we give an inch, some customers want to take that mile.
Yeah.
And so how do we navigate that in collections? We want to be friendly. We encourage our our folks to be friendly and helpful with customers. And then one of the things I always tell collections supervisors in particular, and collectors, but it's really more the supervisor's judgment, is when is the customer crossing into taking advantage? Like, we want to be flexible, we want to be cooperative and helpful. And then when we see that the customer is starting to take advantage of that, then we obviously have to, that's a line that a collection supervisor needs to be able to identify. So that's also part of what we had in mind to talk about here today. So, but I think one of the first things to think about is accountability, and really, when you think about holding someone accountable, and for today, it's really around collections, is when we're going to hold somebody accountable, it's accountable to what? Like, what is the understanding?
And, that was another thing we were talking about this morning, is that, that that's one thing to have it in the contract, to have it as something that's written, those pieces that you need to hold people, that people need to be held accountable to.
Right.
Uh, those things obviously are in the contract. And we've talked before about how when you go in and you purchase something that's big, that requires pages of documentation and all of that, that there's typically an awful lot going in the head of the purchaser.
Right.
And that there's a really good possibility that there are, they're going to walk away. It's like, I have to make a payment. This is what I have to make, but not all of the other things around the stuff. I mean, there's a lot of times confusion about due dates. There's confusion about, there's just confusion a lot of times about a lot of those things. So, when you say communicate, it's like, it's one thing to have it in the contract. You need to have it in the contract. Where do you go to make sure that has been really, really communicated, so that they know what they really are being held accountable to?
And I don't know that it's possible to communicate every single policy that you're going to have, and handling all kinds of matters related to the account throughout. So it's not like you're going to, give them every single policy about how you handle every single thing. But certainly at the time of delivery, we hope that we're communicating as clearly as we can, because it is like you talk about that. It's like that drinking from a fire hose thing on the day that you're buying as a customer. It's like, there's a whole lot to come at you. It's hard to remember all of it. We like the idea of sending kind of reinforcement videos, as we've talked about in the past, to help kind of drive home the thing. But I think as much as anything, what we want to do is probably drive home the approach that's going to be collections. Is part of the reason that we like to see the collections department participate in or handle the actual loan closing. We like to see a handoff from the sales department to the collection department, because now, as the collection supervisor or collector, I can communicate with the customer, because now the relationship is kind of coming to a close with the sales department. It's starting with the finance department or the collections department. And so now it's important to have the dialogue, involve the collection department if possible. So
how would you do that? I mean, because it's obviously IRS rules are the RFC, which is the collections department, if you're doing a related finance, have to be different entrance, all of that. So there might, and we've seen many dealers where it's a completely different building.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to get too far off on that, because there are different ways to do that. You could do it virtually. You could walk the customer down. If it's the next building over, you walk them over and introduce them to the collection department, and they handle the loan closing. They've got to be ready for it. They've got to make sure that they're scheduled and available to handle that. But I think the key thing there is just handing off the communication from the sales department to the collection department, so that now going forward, if we're going to have a 3 and 4 year relationship with this customer, we need to make sure that the communication is clear between the collections folks and the customer. And, when I think about what I want to communicate, it's really about expectations and how to hold the customer accountable to those expectations. Over the years, I've written articles. I'm thinking of one that I wrote, and I think the topic or the title is something along the line of Friday means Friday. So it means it's that kind of that thing about, and this is true, you see me do this in other relationships, personal relationships, family, whatever. It's like, this is our understanding. So unless we replace it with another understanding, I expect this is still where we stand, right? So if you change the rules and didn't tell me, that's one thing. But unless we communicate it very clearly, I'm thinking this is our understanding. This is our agreement. We're operating from that agreement, right?
Now, obviously there are going to be many things in the contract. There are things we can communicate with them after the close. We've talked about doing short videos and sending them via like a string of the next day, 2 days later, 5 days later, whatever, of just the highlights, which, that's pretty easy to do. Most of our DMSs or whatever have the capability of being able to send or
Sure.
But it's I kind of want to my mind was going was that there's, to hold people accountable, and you have something written down, like, this is the due date Friday. The due date is Friday. The due date is Friday, period. And then internally there's always like, okay, when are we holding them accountable to that date? And so it's one thing, to say this is your due date, but I mean, it's all over the board.
Sure.
When we talk to dealers about it's Friday means Friday, their due date is Friday, and it's like, we don't reach out to them until the following Monday or maybe whatever, and we start, there's kind of what I've witnessed is that there frequently in dealerships, there's not a really set process set in collections about this. I mean, that things are set in like in motion, boom, 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 as well, which kind of holds people that much more accountable. If because from things we've talked about, once you allow things to go longer than what the contract says, then you've basically opened the door for the entire contract for that to go.
Yeah. And I think we might want to save that particular topic for one of our episodes in May, because I think there's a lot of tangents off of this, right? There's a lot of different things to kind of go back to, but I think really what we're talking about is, what is the policy? Have we been clear about what the policy is? So let's just pick due dates for a minute. Are we clear about that? Now, I'm not, and I didn't say at the start of the show about our announcements, but there's a compliance element to this too, but I don't want to dig too deep into that. We're not trying to be attorneys over here, but we solve a lot of our compliance stuff whenever we're consistent, because when we start getting inconsistent, playing favorites, and why do we give this privilege to one and not the other, that starts to look problematic from a compliance standpoint. But again, we're not trying to teach compliance over here as much as we're trying to teach practices that will lend well to, your compliance strategy. But really what I'm saying is, whatever the policy is, we need to announce it and we need to be consistent about it. Will we ever deviate from it? Sure. We'll make exceptions and we'll have a clear policy for how we make an exception. That's a really important management part that I think we could be a different tangent again. But it's like, when I think about this accountability to the understanding, is it's clear. Nobody's changed the understanding. It's well documented that your due date is Friday. So the answer for me would be, and I think you would just say, the action kicks in on Saturday morning. Like, our understanding was Friday. You didn't meet Friday. We're talking about a customer who has shown that they don't manage their money very well. Traditionally, they have not. I mean, that's what the history says. That's why they're in a buy here, pay here dealership often. They haven't managed money very well. They haven't been very disciplined about, so if there's a retraining element to what happens here. And this is why accountability is so important. We can't expect different behavior unless we use different practices, right? And so there's nothing that I'm going to say this morning that should sound like we're being ruthless and difficult and exacting a policy or something on a customer that is unreasonable.
I agree, absolutely. And one of the things when I started in on first off, Facebook user said, call it a payment servicing departments versus collections.
I have no problem.
And I was like, customer success is another thing that it's like, this is the customer success department. This is your rep.
Yeah.
This is the person who's going to help you be able to be successful with your loan.
Sure.
And, but it does help to, there's a stigma to collections.
Yeah. And the other thing that I find, there's also some confusion about collections. Sometimes collections, like some banks refer to collections as only like asset recovery, like back end, recovery of assets, whatever. So sometimes collections has multiple meanings. So I'm fine with calling it the payment servicing department or customer success.
Before I kind of squirreled. I think of like an archetype of grandma.
Okay.
And I think I brought this up in other shows. It's been quite a while, but that this archetype of grandma, I mean, like the grandma that when you drop the kids off, that she has no problem with them. And these are when they're home, it's like, but she has no problem with them. And it's because there's, with a lot, I think about my mom as a grandma. There's an approach of, these are the rules, honey. I will hold you accountable to these rules. I really would hate it if I had to take away your privilege to watch television or to do that. But, that's what's going to happen. And then when you take away the privilege, it's like, oh, that sucks. Do you think you can help now? And then showing them lots of support and love through the process. But it's like that I know with my mom, that there's a level of accountability, and then there's compassion, or there's, an embracing or whatever of like, oh, and so there's, you don't have to go around and, hug them. Right. But it's about, oh, we're so glad that, we got this figured out, and, let us know next time if there's something that's coming up, or, if you're having a problem with the whatever, let us know. And so we can work together to do this, so we don't end up in this situation again.
Yeah.
And that's that persona, that grandma kind of thing that we've talked to some different, some of our different clients, and they're like, who should we hire? And I'm like, there's a persona right there that you can.
I think I've used the example, and this is true often of management, certainly of collections department management. I've used the example of Mrs. Claus, like Mrs. Santa Claus.
Mrs. Santa Claus.
Like if you try to think of somebody whose first demeanor is jovial, so this is the friendly part. They're able to navigate their work day to day in a very friendly, jovial sort of way.
Or even like Santa Claus,
and
but it's like,
doesn't mean they're a pushover.
but
it doesn't mean that they're not still holding people accountable, but they're doing it in a very loving and jovial way. And so,
kind.
It's kind. And so, it's about being, but for me, there's a balance in that we can do, and you can still do it totally in a friendly way. And with a smile on your face is this idea that I said, you heard me say that managers that worked with me heard me talk about, I want to be fair and I want to be consistent. I'm always going to be fair.
An onboarding of a new client, it's like, this is what I really encourage you to do. Fair.
Everything
and
goes through that filter of fair and consistent. And so, and I even went so far in working with managers and hiring when I had my own dealership. Keep in mind, by the time I owned a dealership, I had a good 8 years in the business, managing and training and all that stuff. So I had a lot of experience by the time I became a dealer. And one of the things I would say to the managers at the store was that I would tell them, look, if we can't take this approach that I won't do for one customer what I'm prepared to do for every customer, then I don't really want to be in this business. To me, it's not a business I'm going to enjoy. If I can't have consistency across the board, I'm going to care for my customers, support my customers, be friendly, helpful with all of them in exactly the same way. It's when the customer starts expecting me to do more than I'm doing for the next customer who walks through the door. That's when I draw the line. Like, no, I'm not prepared to do that. I'm happy to help, but this goes back to the other thing we want to talk about with accountability is like, I'm happy to help, and I'm always going to show up and be prepared as a dealer, creditor. In this case, I'm always going to be prepared to show up and do my part. However, what I'm going to expect from you is you also show up and be prepared to do your part, because if I'm going to have to do all the giving, and then next time you're going to ask me to do all the giving, I'm prepared to bring that business relationship to an end.
And that is being fair, and that's being consistent, and there's nothing being mean about. There's nothing mean about that.
Well, take it outside of collections for a minute. Just take it to any personal relationship that you have, a business relationship that you have. If it's not a mutually beneficial relationship, and it's always one-sided, I mean, we're going to lose interest in that.
Yeah.
And so that just is kind of what I'm bringing to this. And I'm saying, I feel like that's an anchor point of my policies and approach to business is I feel like I'm going to be friendly. I'm going to be helpful. I'm going to show up and I'm going to be ready to do my part with every customer. I'm just going to be asking them to do their part. And if they're not prepared to do their part, I'm going to find, and I'll give you a quick example. Customers would often say, I'd get a manager who would call, and this is where customers start getting experience from other business relationships. Maybe they financed with a buy here, pay here a lot in the past. They'll say, hey, I'm having a problem with my my water pump. I need a new water pump. If you would help me, and sometimes the manager's calling me saying the customer is saying, if we would make them the loan, they would happily repay the loan at the end of the note. And I'm just saying, where'd that language come from? Why the end of the note? So that's coming from past experience with another dealer or whatever. Maybe it's coming from the manager. So I would always try to make sure the manager understood for me. When the customer asks, pay for at the end of the note, my answer was just always no. That's asking too much.
I have to say though that having a customer reach out to you proactively and saying, here is a solution. I need your help. Here's a solution. And then, I mean, it's like, appreciate that you're stepping forward and saying, I'm having a problem doing this because I have to do this and this is what it's going to cost. And you can, you go through and it's like, that won't work to do it at the end of the note, but here's what we can do. And so I when I hear that they're wherever they heard that before, but they're at least being proactive. The customer's at least being proactive. And that's like, this is the thing, because I mean, how many customers don't even know that a dealer will do that? And so they just shut down communication. The car sits there for 6 months, no payment on it. And they've already gone on to the next buy here, pay here dealer before that car is, whatever.
No, that's a different element to the communication part. It's like the thing about being able to, certainly if the customer initiates, that's what we want. We want to create, because that is one of the expectations, is communication. Yeah. That's not just from us. That's not us chasing you down every single time a payment comes due. And that's part of, we'll try to dig into that in May. I think that's part of what happens. We hear about that with GPS and start or interrupt. It's like, I think there's a retraining opportunity in collections, and we can do a better job of making sure the customer understands one of their responsibilities is to communicate. Yeah. And if we find it necessary to chase them and track them down every time a payment becomes past due, that's something that we need to bring to a close. That's a problem that we need to solve. That's not the way it needs to work. And so there's a whole element to that we can certainly talk about. But I think what I'm really trying to emphasize here is I want to do the same with every customer. I want to be helpful, and I want to make sure that they do their part and that they show up and do their part. And I would say, if they're willing to do their part, if they're communicating and I can go to the end of the earth with a customer like that. Yeah. Right. It's like, if they're doing their part,
as long as you're still consistent, but yes, if they're doing their part, it's like, these, we will keep going through these boundaries over and over and over again if we need to.
Yeah. And we've got a YouTube video out there. I think it's also inside the Institute on the tenure approach. So this is other thing that you bring to this. And in order to be fair and consistent, you can say, I'm going to do this for you, and I'm going to continue to do this for you. I mean, my attitude can be, what actually comes out of my mouth might be different, but my attitude is going to be, I expect you're going to be a customer with me for 10 years or more. And that means that everything that we do, in whatever it is, mechanical problem, job change, whatever we're dealing with today, my approach is going to be the same. I expect we're going to get past it with a few conditions. I'm going to have to hold you accountable. You're going to have to do your part. Yeah. Right. So this is where the accountability, whatever that looks like, I'm happy to work through. And we're going to work through stuff again and again to next year. It might be something else, whatever. It's like, I'm going to be here to do my part. So long as you're willing to do your part.
I remember you, one of the stories you were dealing with this is before I stepped in. Yeah. A dealer that just said, anything that happens, if you're having a problem with making your payment, come and sit yourself down at that chair right there and let's talk about it. George Montemayor says, I always say, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. Yeah. And it can be like, I'm going to work with you, but I'm going to hold you accountable.
Yeah. And I think that's good. And I think one thing even beyond that, George, is for us is almost like the actions, because the actions need to say what George just said there, is to say that, we need to demonstrate in our actions that we're going to take enforcement action. So maybe quickly, we got a little time. I'll tell the story about, I was managing a dealership in Tennessee and living in Texas and back and forth quite a bit, had a really capable manager in the store. And so I would fly in there and spend some time. And I remember one particular customer that came to us and wanted to finance. They worked for the detail shop up the street that did a lot of our detailing, and they saw a car that they liked, and they came to us and wanted us to finance. And I've just always been really leery about those, because when you start into something where you already have a relationship with a customer or this person outside, and now they come and they want to finance, I'm always just real careful to tell them. And this is true with friends and family. It's like, I'm happy to help you with financing, but you just need to understand, if you step in to our program, you're going to have to live by the same set of rules as everybody else.
I think that's true. We've had conversations about like hiring from your client base, or allowing your have it as part of, this is internal policy, that that your team members can purchase a car, and it's exactly the same as it is for anyone else that walks on the it's that they're going to be held accountable to. We need to make sure that these things are done, and so yeah, it does create a little bit more, I would imagine, just people feeling like they can take allowances.
And this particular person is a really good example of that. And I'm sure our dealer listeners have seen this example in their own situation. It's like, this particular customer they prided themselves a charmer, right? They just kind of charmed their way through life, big, nice smile, and so they just, in their life, that's the way they navigated, as a charmer. And so when they came in, they started expecting, because of the relationship, that they could take privileges, extra time. I don't need to call. You guys know me. In fact, there was a point where we repossessed the car that they'd actually purchased for their daughter. And we repossessed the car. And then I was present in the dealership. I made a point to be there and meet with the manager and the customer. And I was there as the general manager. And I just listened to them just vent. They were livid. Could not believe
that you would do that. I mean, how could you do that to us?
Right.
Yeah.
I could not believe that it came to that. And of course, I just listened, let them go through their whole thing.
One of your superpowers.
Let them just explain, get all their stuff. And I said, I listened to every word. Now I want you to listen to me, And so I just said, this is something we told you, you don't get privileges that others don't get. I'm going to do the same. I've asked Donna as our manager to do exactly the same, or whatever. It's like, let's do the same thing always. And so that's kind of the thing. It's like, it ended up there. Is it because I changed? Is it because I started granting privileges? I was working to hold people accountable to the same thing. And I just think that solves a lot of problems in business.
It does.
It solves a lot of problems in a lot of relationships, but certainly in business, it makes life simpler when we just stay consistent. People know where they stand with us. They know what's expected. They know how to, if there's a problem that needs to be resolved, they have a remedy.
Yeah.
They have a way to go about solving that. So that's kind of the key for me, is how to fix that.
Yeah. It must be really important. Yes, I agree. Taking that, like I said, one of the superpowers that you have that I've really appreciated, and I think that everyone can learn from that, is that your ability to, they talk about you listen with the intent to respond.
Some people do, yeah.
And that when we can approach people with listening to the intent to understand and listen, so people, because how many dealers out there that someone is all upset about something, and all they really well, not all, most of what they really want is someone just to listen and acknowledge their frustration or their whatever, and that a lot can be resolved just from listening. And it's like, okay, let's work together to figure out how we can resolve this.
Yeah, and I think it's natural. It's human nature to want to, if I'm upset and I'm trying to talk to you and you're interrupting me and not let me finish the thing I'm trying to express, then I'm going to continue to carry this frustration. In fact, it's probably going to bottle up, right? It's probably going to bottle up and come out even more. So yeah, I think the best course of action is to let a person finish, express all they want. But I also think that's a really core part of problem solving. If you and I have a problem and you're the one expressing the thing, I really can't begin to solve the problem until I fully understand the stuff, right? So so as a problem solver for me, that's where I'm coming from, is like, I need to hear the whole thing. I need to understand it all. And then I can move forward with suggested remedies or whatever. But it's like, yeah, I think that's just part of it. Listening is certainly obviously going to be part of any part of collections. But I think when it comes to accountability, it's just like, what are the things? And and we need to have consistency. And again, it doesn't mean that we don't ever make an exception to our policy, but we have a very clear practice for that. It's well prescribed.
So there are still rails. And
Yeah.
so when you say consistent, it's like there's an external and then there's an internal too, that you stay consistent with the things so that if someone else comes in and says, well, you did such and such for so-and-so, is like, if there's a problem, come and sit down and we will have the conversation. And
part of the reason that example about, come and sit down is like, that's part of how you earn something, is like you show up, like you come in here and you're willing to meet with me. You show up and communicate. And now when you do that part, I'm prepared to do my part. So that's why that manager was using that example of sit in that chair.
Yep.
And I add the part about there's not going to be any problem that comes up during the time that we have a business relationship. There's not going to be any problem that comes up that we can't solve if you come sit in that chair and talk to me, right? It just won't happen. There's nothing that's going to come up that we can't figure out together. Okay. So when we bring that approach, I can still hold folks accountable. So I think the key thing for me on the accountability piece is you have rails and you have an ability to make an exception to your policy. But the customer in this example has got to earn that flexibility. So how do they do that? That varies depending on what the situation is, what we require of them. We might be requiring, if they say they had a short paycheck, we might ask them to produce a copy of the paycheck or whatever. They can earn some flexibility. But just to demand it or just to expect it without doing their part is the part that I think we have to be prepared to dig in a little bit there. Still friendly, like Hughes and George's, we're very kind about it. We don't have to be weak about it. We stand our ground. We have a policy that's the same with everybody. So that's something I did find it necessary to say to some customers. Look, I'm not asking you to do anything that I haven't asked every customer in the same situation in the past to do. I'm not holding you to a different standard. It's the same standard I always use. So I'm not asking you to do anything different. So that rarely was that necessary to actually express verbally, but that's the mindset that you bring into it. It's like, I'm not asking you to do anything that we don't ask every customer in that situation to do. I'm happy to help. Here's what I need from you in order to provide that help. And so now I'm gonna hold them accountable to that. And if they're not prepared to do that, then I'm prepared to end the relationship, because I'm thinking about this thing over 10 years. And if this is how it's going to be for 10 years, I'd rather just bring it to an end now. Like, this is not how I want to do business for 10 years. If you're not prepared to do your part in this relationship, then I'm prepared to end it now. And so just because I don't want our team to be tied up in making exceptions and somebody's really, so that's where people get, and this is where we lose collectors, is because they get frustrated because there's inconsistency and it's hard for me to hold people accountable. And it's a frustrating enough job as it is.
Yeah.
Without us complicating it by not being consistent.
Yeah.
So anyway,
absolutely.
It's probably a good place to wrap up. I think you can tell there's just tons to talk about. We picked up so many kind of tangents.
Well, we're going to be the month of May. We're going to be talking about collections throughout the month. And if there's something in particular that you out there would like to,
please, let us know.
Please let us know. We're actually going to be working on that calendar during this week.
Yep.
So for all of next month. So if there's something that you would like to have us cover, send us a note.
And I would say, think of it not just in terms of what you would like to have us cover for your employees or your team, or what you'd like it to be able to express to your team or get training with help for yourself. Think about what you would like for us to be able to express to your customers. Like that, because it's kind of the same thing. It's the mirror side of the same thing. So think of it too about if there was one thing you would like for your customers to know that you wish you could communicate better to your customers, what would that be? So let's talk about those things in May.
So Friday coming up, I'm wondering, are we we did the profit forecasting one on Monday, and then we realized that there was a whole nother show for the profit side of that we wanted.
Yeah, there's quite a bit
to cover
actually
that
there.
On Monday or
I can't be
Friday?
sure. Let's announce it when we know for sure we've got all the material together, because there's a little bit of work to be done to take the next step in that conversation. I have some pieces I want to be able to introduce. Probably early next week we'll have that. But yeah, just keep an eye to the schedule. And I would just remind everybody, the best way to know for sure what these topics are going to be is to follow us on YouTube, just because that's the most consistent place to make sure you get the notifications. If you subscribe to the channel over there, then you'll make sure you get the notifications about what these topics are.
And we've had a few dealers reach out to us, and it's like, hey, I'd like to get a little bit more information, because there really is some rich content, rich help, rich guidance that comes through this process of the cash flow forecast. So if there's anything we can do to help you, I threw up the phone number 903-816-0216 is actually Jim's cell phone. Or you can go to, or you can go to octane.group, and that's the website. And then
I'm also at my cell phone number there. I'm accepting funny memes. If you have a funny meme to share, send it.
Let me tell you, this man loves TikTok and funny memes.
Funny memes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us on White Hat Wednesday. We Friday. It's middle of the week. We've got I hope you guys are having a great week this week so far, and let's finish it strong.
See you Friday.
Talk to y'all later. Thanks, guys.